pieces and find what works for you. So funny enough, it's more about the feel, and then I let you guys worry about the tone.
Well, I think that the feel of how the kick drum is the most important factor too, because even when using the kick pad, that's the #1 complaint that drummers always have, is this feels wrong. It's not the sample sounds terrible or anything, is this feels wrong, I can't play properly on this. And 9 times out of 10 you're going to replace the kick drum anyways, so how it sounds is not that important. So I gave you guys some guidelines just in case, but I feel like that's the least important part of making a metal record, at least. Now if you're making a rock record, not exactly, but every producer has their go-to kick sample, and they're probably going to use it at a 90 to 100% blend on a metal album. So just do what makes the drummer happy and what isn't going to give you a nightmare editing later on.
Yeah, with the Avalanche,
Yeah.
you mixed my kick with a sample
We had, but I mean only
for the high
only
end.
the like 5K and up. It was total
It was
just,
for the click,
yeah,
not
just a
not the
little bit.
beef.
Absolutely not. Yeah, we kept your natural kick, and we also kept your natural kick dynamics in there. Like we didn't really do too much to flatten it out or anything like that. We kept it as intact as we could, and we just felt that because there was a wall of guitars to cut through, tuned down to F, we needed to add a little bit of that sample in there. But I mean, it's really quiet. Like that's almost entirely real kick. So for those of you who aren't aware, Sean and I made a record together called Avalanche Worms a few years ago that was basically my version of having a record with real drums. So the performances are real. There's no sample other than one very quiet high-end sample on the kick. And it's an example of the fact that you can make a metal record with real drums, but the reason that people don't is because they like the sound of samples. And honestly, I like the sound of kick samples too. It's more of an artistic thing too. And again, editing will be a nightmare. One of the things that happens in DIY recordings that can't happen on pro recordings is 3 weeks of editing time, 4 weeks of editing time, and you cannot spend that long. You have to get this done in a few hours per song. So if the drummer is hosing you, is a very big deal with the bass drums. You cannot take it lightly. If you're in a situation where it's going to take multiple weeks to edit drums, you're better off not dealing with that drummer because you're going to blow your deadline. So with that said, anything about bass drums in there?
Actually, I was going to ask, how often do you use kick drum isolation tents, and how big of a difference do you think that they make?
I think that, well, the thing is, the reason that I find that they do make a big difference is because if you have a mic that's 4 feet away from the bass, no, even if, let's say you put a U87 in a figure 8 pattern 4 feet away from the bass drum, it then becomes a room mic without that tent there.
I've been using a ribbon for like that same purpose, for picking up just like kind of the fatness and none of the attack. And I've never done it without a...
Try it. You'll have a very low room mic if you do that. Try it to not try it. I would try it just to know why the tent's important. But there's physics behind it, which is that low frequency waves take a longer distance to develop. So you want to have a mic further away from the drum to pick up the full low end of the bass drum. But when you get it 4 feet away, 3 feet away, whatever, you're picking up the rest of the kit. So you have to build a tent, and it's a really funny looking process for people who don't know. You just put up a chair and a blanket, and you tape it to the drum.
Tape, gaff.
Yeah. What's up, Bill?
Can you explain the difference between a sub-kick mic and as opposed to a traditional mic, and why you would use both or one or the other?
Sure. Subkick mic, for those of you who don't know, and we tried to get one here. We couldn't get one.
Kick pad kind of looks
It
like
looks like a kick pad, or it looks like an inverted snare drum. It is designed to only pick up the sub frequencies, and it also sounds really good on floor toms. But for instance, when you mic a bass drum, it will often put the mic against very close to the beater, like that, like the D6, which is, very, very tight low end and very, very controlled mids and punch. But that's not that big boomy booty shake and low end. You're not going to get that from a D6 1 inch away from the beater. So that's where you would add a sub kick, and all you get is a thud when you put it up there, and it's about this size, and it's basically a speaker. Yes, sir.
I actually have one that I made.
That's cool.
And yeah, and it's actually really simple because it is just a speaker working in reverse. And so if you find a random speaker laying around, chop one end off a mic cable and strip the 2 wires out and hook those 2 wires to the 2 tabs on the speaker, plug the mic cable in, and it's a sub-kick mic.
I've never actually A/B'd the homemade ones versus the store-bought ones, but I can't imagine that they would be too different, because all you're picking up is sub-frequencies.
Right. Yeah. I've never actually used one of the store-bought ones. I've just messed with the one that I built. And it definitely serves the purpose. I don't know how it compares to a properly made one or not, but
The properly made one serves the
yeah,
purpose.
if you want to try it and you have a spare speaker kicking around, it's pretty easy to knock one out.
Yeah, they're pretty simple to make, but they're super effective. And like I said, they're really good on floor tom bottoms as well. If you want to get an absolutely huge low end on the floor tom. Let's talk about cymbals. I know it says tuning. We'll keep it quick because you can't actually tune a cymbal, but you can choose which cymbals you're going to use, and they all have different pitches. And in general, I think for recording, you want to use thinner cymbals. Thicker cymbals definitely start sounding really gongy. And while they do work live, it's a completely different beast than in the studio. I don't know, have you ever had a situation other than hi-hats where thicker cymbals really work well in the studio?
No, not really. I mean, ride cymbals I use 2, and one is light and one is heavier, and that's just to have the range there. But other than ride cymbals, you notice in this, I mean, my stuff is just really thin and dark. It has a very quick attack to it, and you're not hearing the clang. You're hearing the shh, and I think with heavier cymbals, you definitely get into that clangy thing and
The gongy
the
sound.
gongy thing. And yeah, I mean, live you can get away with it because a lot of times you're not even overheading, depending upon the size of the club or the application. And so you're using that natural loudness to kind of compensate for that. But yeah, and live it's a lot more forgiving. The studio, you're really under the microscope. So yeah, and you can tune a cymbal because you can dampen it and or have it ring freer. So I mean, you're not going to change the pitch, but you can change to a certain degree sustain. Yeah, and again, I would pick a set of cymbals that, like your toms and your drum kit, you want it to sound like it's from the same family. You don't want too big of a difference in the sounds, other than maybe, high to low kind of thing.
I will say, though, that just because it's the same kind of cymbal doesn't mean it's going to sound the same. So you got to experiment. Just like we said with heads and everything, you have to experiment with cymbals. Our cymbal locker is way more extensive than our snare collection, and we are constantly changing out cymbals. So I'm going to show you guys something real quick about cymbals and how you set them up, the looseness and the tightness makes a huge difference. This is perfect. Sean sets his stuff up perfectly. But I meet a lot of guys who have them like this, and they get real touchy about this because drums are a feel instrument. But if you do that, you're going to hear all the vibration of the stand. It's going to move around. It's going to sound incredibly swooshy. So you want your cymbals to be kind of how you had it before. See, this is perfect. You don't want your cymbals swooshing around like crazy, moving around like crazy. You want to keep them to a nice...
Or too choked either.
Yeah.
Too, like,
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
it's
what
just like-
happens if you tighten them too much, or if you hit them too hard. All right. So I think we basically covered drums and how to basically tune them. Before we move on to actually miking them up, I will say that once again, I don't think you need to get too bogged down with the physics of all this, or technical this, or math that. Just know how to set it up, know that you're going to experiment, kind of know what you like, and go for it. And that's how you're going to get good at it. It doesn't really change whether you're making $1 million records or you're DIYing it. The only thing that changes is the gear and the stakes. But a snare drum is a snare drum and a tom is a tom. It's not like big bands have different drums that work different ways. It's all the same. Microphone is a microphone. SM57 is an SM57. So just learn this stuff, and I would commit this process to memory and make the process part of how you work. So let's say that we have the drum set up. We like the way it sounds. Do you want to just hit it real quick for me? We'll see if we dig it still, or if it dropped like crazy. So this would be the point where I just say, play for a second. And I'll sit here in the room and listen. So play for a second, and I'll sit here in the room and listen. So just for the sake of argument, I'm going to say that there's a weird ring on the snare.
Okay.
Sounds like it's going...
Yeah, which it is. Now, if we like the pitch of the drum,
I think the pitch is good.
then we go to our good friend Moongel, and we figure out, and I like to start out big before I reduce. I like to do the process of subtraction versus addition. So since I have one on the top, I'm going to put it right across from it, actually, which is where I put my finger to begin with.
Yeah, see, there's a little more, or move the spot.
Gone.
Yeah,
So
cool. So I'd say maybe play a little bit more, and let's see what it sounds like in conjunction with the rest of the kit. Awesome. Problem solved. So I would also take this moment to say that you are playing at the intensity level that you will be recording at, correct?
Correct.
A lot of drummers play way softer when we're checking tones, which they don't think they are, but they are. And maybe demonstrate what it sounds like to play way softer.
end comes right in as soon as you start hitting
Yeah,
harder.
it's like how you can't judge anything based on somebody wussing around. So drummers, play the way you're going to actually play on the recording. So, all right, we dig how this sounds. Time to
But
make
this
it.
is not through the gear.
We dig how it sounds in the room.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. This is, because it's going to sound different now through the chain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first step is just be happy with where you're at with yourself in the room.
Yeah, and
And of course, they sound different from where you're sitting versus from where I'm sitting.
yeah, they're a lot louder probably over there.
Yeah, it's a totally different animal. That's why it's great to play for a little bit and then come in the control room. And then, it's a pain in the butt, but keep doing that because it's a completely different thing than sitting here. It might sound great to you here, but that's not necessarily what all the other mics are picking up.
Or conversely, it might sound terrible to you, but great
Right.
in the control room.
Correct.
I've actually encountered that quite a bit where drummers will be like, this really doesn't sound right, and they'll come in the control room and be like, this sounds incredible. So go with what you know as an engineer. So like the way it sounds, this kit is already mic'd. Look at this like a cooking show. We don't have time to mic an entire drum set, but this would be the point where you mic it. So you would put together an input list. What an input list is basically a list that tells you which microphone corresponds to which drum, which goes to which input on your interface or gets routed to an EQ, like these louder than liftoff EQs that we have, and then into the interface. This is where you plan this out. It's really simple. If you don't plan this out, you're going to forget it. Now, I have one written out. In reality, I use Google Docs or Google Drive. That's really efficient because you do it on your iPad out in the live room, and then it's already in your control room, and it's not all archaic like writing things down and scribbling like a sixth grader like I do. But just to give you guys a template, those of you who buy the class will get this input list blank from us, which you can download. So I have this already completely written out, basically going from the kick to the kick pad to the snare top, the snare bottom, the four toms, the hats, the rides, the china, and the rooms. They're all on here. And I'm just going to walk you guys through what's going on right here. We've got a D6 on the kick drum inside, right there, Audix D6, and it is going to API channel 1, and then it's going to a louder than liftoff EQ, and then it's going into Pro Tools. And so right here on my input list, I wrote drum, mic, preamp, patch 2, and track. And I have it kick, D6, API 1, Lunchbox 1. And then when I came to make the session in Pro Tools, right here, see kick corresponds to input 1, like on my input list. It's really, really simple. This is just to keep yourself from forgetting. And believe me, when you start to get into lots of mics and an extensive setup with tons of cymbals, you're going to forget what's what. You're going to forget if you put the hi-hat on channel 16 or 17 and then the overhead that's on the hi-hat side on channel 18 or 19. So in the interest of time, I'm going to tell you guys what we did in the kit. Basically, I wanted to mic every piece individually. I don't have the time or the inputs to do that, so I decided what would be the most important pieces to mic here. So we started with the kick, D6. We put an SM57 on the snare top, and that's going to an API. And the characteristics of an API, like if you were to like read a description or just use your ears, is that they're very punchy and they have great upper mids. So therefore, you want your toms, your snare to punch through everything. and you want your kick to punch through everything. So that's why I decided to put those on APIs. And then I sent them to EQs so that I could give them a little bit more top end and into Pro Tools. I put the toms through Neve 1073s. Neve 1073s are known for having a little bit more low-mid action, being beefier preamps. I mean, use your ears, but this is the stuff that is a basic characteristic of the preamp. I want the toms to sound big and warm, so I chose the Neves.
Alex, do you want to get a quick shot of the, and I'll point you in the right direction, a quick shot of his board and preamps and stuff here?
These are the APIs. We've got the snare on 2 and the kick on 1. So the Neves right here, the 1073s. They're warmer and have more of a low mid-range warmth to them. So warm is that word I hate, but that's, if you were to read the description on this piece of gear, that's what it would say.
That and just the best piece of gear for drums. Like,
Yeah. If I had only these, that would be amazing. So I put the toms through those because toms can be finicky, and I figure in order of priority would be to get the toms through your best gear possible because they will sound the worst if you have to replace them. Kick is almost throwaway. It's not really, but if you have to go in order of priority in terms of what you realistically have in front of you, pick your best preamps for your overheads and your toms because you're probably going to put a sample on the snare and you're probably going to replace your kick. So that's...
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you always use the same chain for all toms? Like, is it a matter of you want to use the same pre for all the toms because we've tuned them to sound the same, we want them to be the same, so we're going to put them through the same EQ, not maybe the same setting per se, but do you want the same signal path for something you're trying to keep kind of homogeneous?
9 out of 10 times, yeah.
Okay.
9 out of 10 times, it's going to look like that, I feel like. Same mics and same approach, same direction, same angle, same everything, because that you keep the phase relationships the same, you keep the tonal characteristics the same. And like you said, we're trying to keep it within a certain tonal family. So I think the difference between preamps is so huge. Like API sounds nothing like a Neve.
Right.
So I definitely would do that, but I haven't done that every single time. Like something that I would do is sometimes we put 421s on tom tops and then D6s on tom bottoms, but then on floor toms, we'll put sub kicks on the bottoms.
Right.
So, you know, that changes things considerably.
Right.
And we also go in order of priority. Tom bottoms aren't as important as tom tops, so if we only have certain preamps available, we will put the tom bottoms on other
So
pre's.
you delegate your gear kind of thing.
Definitely, because look, I only have
Yeah.
X amount of inputs available, so I'm thinking to myself, obviously, the ideal would be to have all Neve preamps and all the time. Yeah, with you, it would really just be like a day for tones in a place that we're comfortable with and a day or two to record. But in reality, for most situations, I need like a week to 10 days, and would love to have X amount of gear. So that not always being possible, I think to myself, what's the first thing that can go in the mix?
Right.
Kick drum.
Gotcha.
What's the second thing that can go? Not snare all the way, but it's probably going to be really reinforced with a sample. What's the drum that I hate sampled? Toms.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then what ruins everything if it sounds like garbage? Overheads.
Right.
So I kind of just delegate it. You get talking about this stuff and then you go forever. So one thing that we'll skip for now and come back to would be the kick pad setup, which we were going to talk about next if we're going to do rough tones now. So real quick, I'm just going to say about all this stuff is don't get personal. and get the kit sounding awesome before anything else. All right, record rough tones. So basically what I'll need, and you already know what I need, but I'm going to tell you guys what a good guideline to get out of a drummer for rough tones is. Basically, have program material specific tests. If you're doing a record full of blast beats, have the drummer play blast beats. Don't have him play a funk beat if you're going to then record blast beats and breakdowns. Have him play sections of music that are actually part of the album you're about to record. If not, you're going to get tones that have nothing to do with your album. And the reason I say this is because drummers will do this to you. They will just play when in reality is what the album sounds like. So make sure that the rough tones section is relevant to the material. Number two, get a wide variety of beats. So say that the most common beat on something is a breakdown beat and the second most common is a blast beat. Have him play breakdown into blast beat, breakdown into blast beat. Make sure he throws in some fills and make sure he hits every single cymbal. Once you do that, go from left to right on the cymbals. And then that's what we'll do right now. So without further ado, why don't you...
All right, so in my head, I'm just going to kind of reference the track we're going to record later today.
Okay.
And then I'll throw some fills in, and then now for the cymbals, do you want it isolated hits?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you maybe just give me single hits of your